Welcome to the Early Learning Summit, hosted by Capital Region ESD 113 and moderated by Carrie Blankenship. This is Session 1, Developmentally Appropriate Settings.
This summit came to life in response to the significant impact that COVID has had on our early learning systems and enrollment this year. We understand that many of you are trying to predict and navigate the long-term implications of this. Our intent was to create space for you to receive information, also to collaborate across the state with other people who are navigating the same concerns, and to plan strategically so that we can be prepared when the fall arrives and we're looking at enrollment and fresh, bright eyes coming into our school, and returning bright eyes as well, because we hope they're excited to come back, whether that's virtually or in person or however that may look. We want to be ready. And so to begin, we wanted to create a common understanding of what best practice in early learning it looks like. And that will serve as a starting point for all of our future planning. Over the next 4 sessions, you'll see this structure. We'll have a short presentation. Today's a little bit longer, but we'll have a presentation, we'll have breakout time. Your breakout time will be increasing over the 4 sessions. Again, our intent is to get you collaborating and connecting with resources to help you problem solve and plan for what lies ahead. Each session will involve an exit ticket. It's important that you fill this out because I have scheduled several hours tomorrow to review exit tickets that will inform next week's session. And so I appreciate you being patient with me as we kind of build the plane as we fly it. We've not done this before, and we truly want this to be responsive to where your needs are and where you are in your navigation of this whole time. And so knowing that your feedback is very important to us, and not only for myself in planning this, but we will also be sharing this on the broader level of across the state and other ESDs and with OSPI to help inform the guidance that they will be giving to us as well. And without further ado, I am going to introduce to you Gretchen Sarbrunig, and she is from OSPI. She is the transition coordinator. And she works in early learning and has for a very long time. She is kindergarten transition coordinator.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry, Gretchen. I even made a note of it and I messed it up.
I know, and it's actually a broader role than just kindergarten, so they kind of messed up. But you know, that's the way titles are. They don't really tell you what the job is.
Right? It's and other duties as assigned. We're all familiar with that term in like in education. All right, Gretchen, I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to you. I thank you so much for being here today, and I'm so excited for the information that you are about to share with us.
Thank you all for inviting me. I am just delighted to be doing a session with the ESDs. I come from the ESD background. I used to work for Puget Sound ESD and have been in early learning more years than I care to count. Still as passionate about it as I was the first day I started as an assistant teacher while I was in college. So I'm very grateful to be able to talk to you about it today. I am coming to you as a lifelong learner. I do not consider myself to be the leading expert on developmentally appropriate practice by any stretch of the imagination. We are all coming at this at our own phase of learning. So just wanted to put that out there. This presentation borrows heavily from work that the OSPI Office of Early Learning is currently doing to support a pilot initiative with transitional kindergarten. And we are doing that with consulting help from our partners at the Bellingham Public Schools. And so I will be acknowledging the slides that come directly from Christy Dominguez and Nina Baloo. as I do this presentation. I also want to acknowledge the full team at OSPI, Early Learning and Early Learning Special Education, as they have all contributed to this presentation. And I also know that Ryan will be presenting with you tomorrow. So consider this to be kind of in two parts, with her part coming in tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to pull this down so I can start my slideshow. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, so again, I'm Gretchen. I come from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. I've worked there in a couple of stints, and I'm just thrilled to be back working with Karma Hugo and others in the Office of Early Learning, and Ryan and Julie from Early Learning Special Education. I'm seeing lots of familiar faces and names joining us here today. Really what I hope to accomplish with you today is to think about district requirements and district options. Districts are required to serve children with disabilities from ages 3 to 5. Many districts have chosen to offer a range of early learning programs for children as young as infancy through kindergarten and on into 3rd grade with before and after school and beyond. So in developmentally appropriate practice, which we're going to be talking about today, we draw our definitions from the National Association for the Education of Young Children. It is especially critical during the pandemic, as the districts are going to be receiving children with widely varying levels of development in their pre-K, transitional kindergarten, and full-day kindergarten programs. And it provides unique challenges and considerations for both kindergarten and 1st grade in 2021. So some of the slides that I will be sharing today are drawn from a webinar that we recently did regarding kindergarten and 1st grade enrollment. So the first half will be on developmentally appropriate practice, and the latter half is on thinking ahead to the fall and summer. Okay, what's not going on here? All right, so just want to spend a moment here to acknowledge with gratitude the native lands, ancestral lands, which we occupy. For those of you who live in the Olympia area, we give gratitude back to the Nisqually Nations, Chehalis, Shoalwater Bay, Chinook, Squaxin Island, Puyallup, and Muckleshoot. I personally give gratitude for the Stillaguamish, Coast Salish, and Duwamish from where I'm presenting today. If you would like to enter into the chat box the native lands whose ancestral lands you are currently sharing, we would welcome seeing that. Okay. The OSPI generally shares vision, mission, and values slides at the very beginning and our slides on equity. And I know that many of your districts have similar statements, but I kind of highlighted the parts of this that I think are particularly relevant for our discussion today. Early learning, the intention of it is to empower families and communities and educators to closing the opportunity gap. Doing this requires that we ensure equity, that we collaborate, and that we consider service to be their primary mission of our work. We will only achieve excellence through continuous improvement and focus on the whole child. So I'm going to dive into developmentally appropriate practice. I'm also going to ask Carrie and Shiloh to be monitoring the chat and just interrupt me at will in case there are things that I need to address, because I will not be able to focus on the chat box. So thank you for helping me with that. So I start by sharing this photo of the Squaxin Island Early Learning Program. I believe they call it the Seedlings Program. And I want you just to take a few notes. You don't need to share them out loud, but take a few notes on your pad about what you see in this classroom. What are the elements of developmentally appropriate practice that you see at work right here? What I can tell you is in the NAEYC definition, developmentally appropriate practice involves methods that promote each child's optimal development and learning, and that practices must be culturally, linguistically, and developmentally gauged to these individuals. So how do we go about doing that? We need to consider the cultural variations in child development and also know that as part of this NAEYC definition, we're looking at commonality, individuality, and context, meaning the cultural context that the child and family brings to your learning community. So, for example, much of the research on which we base our developmental progressions comes from a white dominant Eurocentric core belief system and does not factor in much of the indigenous knowledge and beliefs of other cultures. So, for example, attachment looks very different in certain Asian cultures. And our current body of child development lacks a lot of evidence that is currently being created by scholars such as Dr. Megan Bangs at UW, who has noted the extraordinary strengths that Indigenous children bring to the classroom with regard to seasons, climate, and all of the living creatures that inhabit their world. So I just want to share that we all have limitations to our knowledge, as does our early learning research. Much of early learning development, let me just see if I can make this just a little bit smaller here, covers, shows that children's intellectual, physical, and social emotional growth are interrelated. You cannot pull one part out. So doing math instruction without attending to social emotional skills and language skills is not going to be as effective. Also, children's development is often uneven, where at certain stages of their life, they will develop much more quickly in language.
Gretchen, we've lost your audio.
Or vice versa, their physical development shoots off and they're walking at much earlier ages than other kids, while their language development may come a little bit later. And this is all normal. Children develop in predictable stages at their own pace. So we cannot exactly predict when a child will go through a particular stage of development in one area, but the stages themselves are predictable. The range of typical development can span significantly in pre-K, transitional kindergarten, and full day kindergarten. That continues on to first grade. However, transitional kindergarten and full day kindergarten are the stages of the basic education that are the widest ranges in development of any part of the child's education. So this is what you will see with regard to typical 4- and 5-year-old classrooms. The stage of development goes from here all the way up to the upper line up here. So the classroom environment and teachers need to be ready to receive children where they're at. A developmentally appropriate environment begins with the child. So this little guy happens to be Christy Dominguez's son. We borrow these slides with her permission as part of the presentation related to Bellingham Promise. So to be thinking about your pre-K, your full day K, and your transitional kindergarten and classrooms, on into first, second, and third grade, actually, it all starts with the child. You think about the child, their family, and the body of knowledge that they're bringing with them, their passions, their interests, their strengths, and their areas of challenge. Once you know this child, then you can tap into child development and see where they're at in comparison with their peers. You take that child's strengths and challenges and the child development and you build your environment around that. The environment should serve as the second teacher in a developmentally appropriate early learning classroom. That environment needs to be adapted to the current stages and ranges of development of the children in your learning community, including the way the adult-child interactions build into that. So you want to be allowing enough space and time for adults to truly bond with the children. The children need to be able to trust that their teacher loves and respects them, that their teacher will have their back, their teacher will be able to co-regulate when the child needs scaffolding with their behavior and emotions. Then you take all of this into the next stage, which is assessing and planning and building your curriculum to fit the needs and interests of the children in the classroom. From there, you go to building your environment. And I would note that you want to think not only about your inside environment, but your outside environment as well. Do you have open-ended activities that so the children can apply their imagination and their individual interests to? Do you have clear organization and labeling so children can truly manage their own learning? Have you posted a schedule and a way for them to know what's coming in ways that they can understand if their literacy skills are such that a picture would do better for them than written out words? The classroom, as I noted, needs to reflect the community of learners so that if your community's range of small motor skills and cognitive skills reflects the development more typical to an infant, where their small motor skills require that they have foam blocks, then you need to be including foam blocks for construction projects in your classroom. Many children enter the TK and full day kindergarten classrooms with fine motor skills that would require a Duplo's blocks. They'd be built much more easily with that larger, chunkier Lego. And then you will also have children that are applying their cognitive, small motor, and spatial skills to environments that are looking more like a second or third graders. Okay, I'm getting all sorts of pop-ups here. I'm going to just stop share for just a second. Hang on. Sorry about that. I can't stand the pop-ups. Okay, we're back. Hopefully everybody can see this, and if you can't, please note in the chat, okay? So you'll need to be able to address the development of every child in your classroom and allow that room for growth with the right level of challenge. Okay. So, and that also includes wall space. Wall space needs to really reflect your community of learners so that on the first few days of school, you have almost entirely blank wall space. The teacher only gets the teacher's share of the wall space, and then the community of learners builds the rest of the environment. We want to make sure that classroom environments accommodate the quiet areas for your library center, your writing and your art, and also your noisy areas of having space for blocks to move into your whole group area. Your home area allowing for conversations and a variety of activities, and then manipulatives. So all of the small group social emotional learning can take place in these noisier areas. So here's Christy Dominguez, our Bellingham buddy, with her last full day K classroom. The materials in each area are open-ended. You're able to reach into the children's cognitive and creative spaces at the same time so that they can truly reflect their full selves in their classroom. Organization is key. You want to be attuned to the child's emotions and look at the classroom from the child's perspective. So getting on your knees to see what the child sees when the child enters the classroom is a very helpful element to regulating the social emotional environment in the community. So if a child comes into the classroom and sees a lot of materials on the floor, sees a home area that is in complete disarray, they may be feeling stress the moment they enter, and that stress they will convey through their behavior. The behavior may be maladaptive behavior because of the way the classroom is organized. So thinking about the environment from the child's perspective and the community's needs is a really important tool. So this picture comes from Nina's full day kindergarten classroom. Nina Ballou had her house area inside, and a few of her students approached her and told her that they were going to set up a restaurant that was accommodating to COVID standards, with customers eating outside, placing their orders at the window, and the kitchens team bringing their orders out to the outdoor tables. And Nina agreed, as long as the children brought the furniture outside and then put it all back the exact same way it was before. And with their uninterrupted 60 minutes of learning, they created their restaurant. So to accommodate this type of open-ended learning, you're going to need to be really thinking about the schedule and the ages of the children you are serving. So for 3 and 4-year-olds, typically about half of their time is spent in that free choice, uninterrupted play. This is how children learn. They learn less well as young children in whole groups. And so in TK and at the beginning of full day kindergarten, it's recommended that classroom teachers spend no more than 10 to 15 minutes in the whole group. And then that amount of time can adjust upwards as they get closer to first grade. So take a good look at your daily and your weekly schedule to ensure that children have plenty of time to run and play, time to be outside and to really, use their outside voices, and time to be inside to use their inside voices. Transitions can build in all sorts of activities such as songs, counting rhymes, because all of this time, children are learning all the time and everywhere. So now I'm going to transition into the second part of my presentation. So if you do have questions about developmentally appropriate practice in your classrooms, if you could please enter them into the chat, I would really welcome that. And I will pull that chat up and just take a glance at it. Yes, the slide deck will be shared after the presentation. I will create a PDF of it and send it back so that you can do that. And again, acknowledging the heavy support from our partners up in the Bellingham Public Schools. So this stage of the presentation is supporting what your districts will need to know and be able to support in the coming months as children enroll. Yes.
Before we get too far along, I'm sorry, someone did have a question about the graph in the last slide.
Okay, let me go back. Oops, did I do that right? No, I didn't do that right. Okay, yes, what's the question?
What does individual time mean in the last graph?
I am guessing that individual time, I'm pretty sure it means worksheets. I think it means that, students are instructed to sit down and work on their journals. They're working on individual art projects. They're working on individualized assignments. So that was my understanding of that. It could also be teacher one-to-one time and working on individual projects. Any other questions there?
Nope, nothing else has popped up.
Okay. So I do want you to take a look while we're here at meals, okay? 18% of the child's time in pre-K is spent in meals. That's also when they spend their time building their social emotional skills. They're talking while they're eating, right? And there's small group stuff that goes on there too. Maybe they're learning about subitizing by, looking at the number of objects in the teacher's hand and immediately identifying how many there are. During typical kindergarten, only 2% of the time is spent in meals. So think about that from a 4-year-old's point of view. Do they have enough time to eat adequate nutrition for their day? From a 5-year-old's point of view, a lot of energy is needed for all of that learning and brain development. Okay, I'm going to continue now moving into enrollment decisions and the right to a basic education. So we will be looking at the WAC codes for the requirements to transitional kindergarten, full day kindergarten, and first grade of what is required for a child to enroll in those grades. I also just wanted to plant a seed for thought from the child's and family's perspective. What do they assume is included in a basic education? Can they assume that the child's civil rights will be acknowledged? Can they assume that their child will be loved and respected? Just certain things to think about from the fuzzier side of this that may not be codified in WAC. What is in WAC is that the uniform entry age for kindergarten is that the child must be 5 years of age as of midnight, August 31st of the year of entry. That is the only requirement to enter kindergarten. So if you recall my slide with the graph of the typical age ranges of development of a 5-year-old, it's a wide range of development that may look more like what a typical infant has, all the way up to what a typical second grader might have. The local option exceptions to uniform entry are that the child who is not yet age 5 by August 31st may be deemed eligible for either regular or transitional kindergarten. Transitional kindergarten is intended to be a program for 4-year-olds who will turn 5 by August 31st and have not been served or served well by other early learning programs. It's intended to be an early intervention program for children who have either been suspended or have not had their needs met for their disabilities with IEPs, or have had behavioral challenges, or have never had access, have been on a waiting list their entire early learning time. So those programs really support communities by being a gap filler. Required in transitional kindergarten is shared enrollment and recruitment with their Head Start and ECAP and other early learning partners in the community, and can be a great gap filler with a memoranda of understanding with their partners. The first grade requirements are that the child is age 6 as of midnight, August 31, and that is the only requirement to enter first grade, meaning that districts need to be prepared to accept any child that meets that condition and their current level of development. We all know that that is going to be even more challenging and more exciting in the fall of 2021 to 22. If you think about the perspective of enrolling in school and being at least get connected in some manner with their peers, if they've had nothing but a home environment in the last year, it could be a very exciting moment. So we hope that school districts are embracing that same level of excitement in receiving children. And will, you know, if they are, there's questions about a child who may not be quite 6, but looks quite ready to enter first grade, we anticipate and hope that districts will develop their screening processes to really think about that individual's child's needs. I'm going to use my own daughter as an example. She's a July birthday. She had been acting out in preschool, doing things to challenge her teacher, like hiding in the closet or running away on field trips. But we learned when she entered kindergarten, she had been quite bored in preschool, and she had never embraced learning in that way. Came into kindergarten reading, and if they had turned her away, I cannot imagine what we would have done. I know there are a lot of kids out there that have really moved forward quite quickly in working with their families in a variety of homeschooling type situations that might have had some remote instruction going on, but they have grown at their own paces and in their own ways during that time. And so we should not assume by default that there is a learning gap. So kindergarten experiences qualifying for first grade, there may have been some children that were enrolled in a private kindergarten program that would have allowed them entry before they turned 5. Different rules than the August 31st cutoff. And so for those children who at a younger age were truly ready for kindergarten, they may be at a younger age truly ready for first grade, younger than 6. So be thinking about those individual needs from the very beginning. The data that we have seen at OSPI on enrollment looks like this. So if you compare the October 2019 count to 2020, you will see a 14% reduction in enrollments in kindergarten. There have been reduced enrollments in most other grades as well, but kindergarten had the biggest gap in enrollment. We recently conducted a webinar. Karma Hugo led a webinar that included on K-1 enrollment and included a survey. And here's what we found out from the survey in terms of the people who were participating. We had 45 teachers, 34 administrators, 29 principals, and many of you at the OSPI ESD level. And what we learned from that survey is that while the WACs provide the age-based guidance around enrollment, holding students back is really not recommended. We do not recommend that you go strictly by the age, but more by the individual needs that you're seeing. Teachers can support a wide range of skills and degrees of readiness if they really understand the needs of the child. It goes back to that graph where you start with the child and then think about child development, the environment, and build it on around to the curriculum and instruction. Parents and guardians need to know what systems the school will have in place to support their child. And that gets to my point about respect for the individual, love and nurturing of that child, because this is the family's most beloved part, right? They're trusting you to take good care of their child. And the child has the right to learn, has the basic right to education as of the beginning of kindergarten and a little bit earlier with transitional kindergarten. Their learning, whether they were enrolled or not, has been taking place. And so taking a slower start to that school year with very intentional transition practices, considering the benefits of observational and formative assessments to really understanding the needs of the children is going to be essential in the coming year. Family connection, many districts have chosen to apply it to other grades. So I know for a fact that West Valley School District on the eastern side of the state, they started applying it to first grade, and it is now required in all grades, K-12, as a great start to the relationship between the teacher, the school, and the family. If you start the year with building that relationship, you're going to have a much greater likelihood of the student's success in school and life. Developmental progressions are the key to understanding those areas of learning. You can get this from my Teaching Strategies Gold, but you can also get these developmental progressions from the CDC. The California Department of Education has an excellent developmental progression, and they're super useful in thinking about screening and placement. So, as I noted earlier, learning happens everywhere, anywhere, and all the time. The learning that they took part in with their grandmother, learning songs, learning how to knit, learning how to cook in the kitchen, the science projects that they might have been doing outside, either, as part of their remote instruction or just out of their natural curiosity, all of that matters. So be careful not to underestimate that learning, and know that there will be this huge range of skills at school entry, and that screening results should take those young learners into account. Just doing a time check here.
Can we pause for two questions?
Yes.
So there's been a little bit of question about transitional kindergarten, and thank you, Josie, for jumping in there with resources. Can you speak a little bit more to specific considerations for transitional kindergarten, and briefly touch on what would be maybe required to establish that within your district?
So transitional kindergarten, let me see if I can get out of this and get you to the 5 pillars. So if you go on the OSPI website, and I'm just going to minimize you guys here for a second while I go fishing. There is a page on transitional kindergarten with 5 pillars of instruction. When I'm done presenting, I will put the handout of those 5 pillars in the chat box. You will be looking at the age of the child. You will need to set up a process, which could include a memoranda of understanding with your early learning partners, meaning you need to find out what Head Start and ECAP programs are sharing your service area. You need to learn about the family childcare providers and the childcare centers who are in your area, so that you are not competing for enrollment of the same students who are already enrolled, maybe may have a working connections subsidy. And you don't want to be drawing away from their business. You also want to be benefiting your community by filling the gap, especially with regard to developmental preschool and transitional kindergarten. Having inclusive classrooms is one of the requirements of transitional kindergarten. They need to follow all of the 3 requirements of WA Kids, meaning you will be conducting the family connection, the whole child assessment by 12 weeks after the beginning of your transitional kindergarten using My Teaching Strategies in Gold, and the early learning collaboration. Well, you've already done your shared recruitment and enrollment, and that is the first step of that early learning collaboration is communication, right? So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about TK at the end of this, but it's an excellent opportunity. And I will also tell you a little bit about a grant opportunity when I'm done, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Anything
Thank you,
else?
Gretchen.
And how are we
Yes,
doing on time here?
we are just great on time. You're doing
Okay,
great.
super.
Yeah. So the other 2 questions were around one being, does OSPI support 3 days without formal instruction in K-12? And then the other question was, would OSPI support 177 days of school versus with 3 days for conferences before kindergarten started?
Okay, I am going to take those offline and
Perfect.
respond to them by tomorrow. Okay, so if you could just like cut and paste those into a document, Carrie, I'm going to go to the, figure that out with my peeps at OSPI tomorrow. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Somehow West Valley's been able to do it. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I can reach out and find out how they do that with regard to the 180 hours of instruction requirement. Okay. Okay, moving on here. Whoops, I got to get clicker back in here. So one useful tool in thinking about screening young children, and not it's a screening, but in thinking about gauging a child's readiness to enter in, or your classroom's readiness to welcome the child, is thinking about GOLD. So for the typical 4-year-old, they will be exhibiting anywhere from this level 3.
We can't
All
see
the
your
way.
screen, Gretchen.
Oh, you can't. Shoot.
Nope.
Okay, I'm sorry. I stopped
That's okay.
sharing. Hang on back here. Thank you for telling me before I got too far down there. That's embarrassing. Okay, here we are. Can you see me now? Okay. Sorry about that. So the typical 4-year-old will represent this blue band in gold. However, you will also see skills that are more typical for a 3-year-old. You may see skills that are more typical for a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old, depending on the challenges the child has and the strengths the child has. And so being able to look at all areas used by an ECAP and Head Start in gold, but most particularly the WA Kids areas, the objectives and dimensions in the WA Kids part of gold. That might be a useful place to start in thinking about what to look for in that observation with your entering TK, full day K, or first grader. Also think about the requirements for observations in special education and any potential early intervention that may be useful. Having difficulty with my clickers here. So the assets to this tool is that it's whole child and it's strengths based. It uses these developmental progressions and key objectives for development and learning. And there are tools for involving the whole family. My Teaching Strategies has a lot of planning functionality built into it for partnerships with and inclusive classrooms using creative curriculum. There are even greater options in planning your classroom environments and offering activities to families through the Family app. It's a very powerful platform that can be used in a variety of ways. It's technically not a screening tool. So it cannot be used for diagnosis, and it cannot be used to monitor student growth for the purposes of lab. You will need to be thinking with a robust package when it comes to students being diagnosed, ready for an IEP. However, one of the unknown and rarely used function is this vertical teaming opportunity that can be taking place with GOLD. Really thinking about teachers who upload their documentation and being able to really deeply understand the needs of each child as they transition from your pre-K developmental classroom into your TK and or full day K, and then off into first grade. It's an excellent tool, especially when you're looking at the documentation that's been uploaded to provide the evidence for that observational assessment. Principals would be able to see that those elements of documentation if the teacher uploaded it. It's particularly easy to do if you're using creative curriculum, but it's super easy in the GOLD app. So if you have any questions about that, reach out to Carrie. So I'm at the conclusion. I can't believe, when you time these things and you're practicing, you don't really know what it's actually going to be. It's part of this building the plane while you're flying it. But we really encourage districts to greet children where they are. This quote from this retired superintendent in New York emphasizes the joy that we should be experiencing in our early learning classrooms with the children. So children bring all of their vitality and their inspiration and creativity. We want to make sure that our classrooms do not stamp that out early. We want to make sure that we're seeing a lot of music and dance, and that we are greeting them with compassion and hope through stories and books that really help them make sense of this crazy upside down world that they have been experiencing. They are not needing to be tested. They do not need a whole lot of worksheets. They want to get to know their kindergarten teacher and their new friends and the reading fun that takes place in those classrooms. And they truly have missed their most important adults, their teachers whom they trust and adore. So I hope that we can be entering this new year with that great sense of hope and anticipation for the potential of these beautiful human beings whom we are entrusted to care for. So here's my moment of gratitude for Christy Dominguez and Nina for their amazing slides, including photos of their classroom, and my gratitude back to our whole team at OSPI, which I'm seeing Julie Dean's name was written in twice. And I know that you will be seeing Ryan tomorrow, and please contact us with any questions that you might have and feedback. We will be seeing some kindergarten and first grade enrollment guidance coming out soon. We are entrusting that you will be honest with us in your feedback about what's working and not working, because we're all learning at the same time in this pandemic. Okay, well, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Really appreciate that.